Hello, this is the next tool video in the self mastery series. So, I just went over constructs, and while constructs are a great tool, it's not the only tool I use. The next one, which I'll say that it helps with the self identification. So, this one, instead of it being a tool used to build up new habits or routines or stuff like that, instead, this is going to be focused more on yourself. It's introspection. So you would think that, well, if you're diving into yourself and learning about yourself, isn't the surveying video effectively the same as the introspection stuff? I would say technically, but the way in which I use this tool is different. With the introspection, it's more about on the fly and like briefly after a scenario happens, doing introspection on yourself, as opposed to sitting down and kind of as a totality kind of thing where you go through and you filter out all of the possible scenarios of like your life on, oh well, what am I currently eating, okay, figure out that, or whatever it is, right? So for this, introspection is effectively, as the the actual word itself is just like looking within and kind of inspecting the internal you in some way. And so what is it useful for? Why even have it as a tool? Don't most people do it? Well, in the past, I would have said, yeah, most people introspect, but I actually don't think that's the case. So, sorry, I just finished the construct video, and yeah, I don't know, my throat's a little itchy, so sorry about that. Anyway, so introspection. The what, looking inward. The why, because when you do this, you're able to build up a habit of questioning your actions. And this may sound counterintuitive because I think it's important to be to have conviction when you're taking action, doing things, whatever. But I think it's also equally important to look back on actions you've made and kind of you're not doing like a hindsight thing. What you're doing is you're kind of checking in with yourself to see if you are satisfied with how you acted. And this can be incredibly insightful when it comes to like finding blind spots that you may not even realize are there. That's why they're blind spots. You just don't see them. And I'm not saying you're going to catch all the blind spots. But what I will say is using introspection can drastically reduce the amount of blind spots you have. So that's why I think it's a powerful tool. So I'll give you an example, and then we'll kind of get into the mechanics of introspection. So, and I will say, introspection is it's a construct I've built. So this is why it's coming after. It's something that you kind of have to train yourself to do, otherwise you just won't do it. And there's nothing wrong with you not doing it. It's just like, it doesn't really work the same way if you don't kind of do it more quickly. Because there's kind of a skill set that you're going to build by doing it during the moment or after or whatever. Instead of like building it up and then doing something where it's like at the end of the week you look at it, like, yeah, that can work, but that's a different skill set. So an example, I will use what happened earlier today as a great example of this. There was I ordered some lasagna and some pasta from a restaurant, and the delivery driver, he showed up, or at least I thought he showed up, and he gave me the food, and I said, okay, here's the confirmation number, and he's like, I don't need a confirmation number. And I thought it was weird, and so I did a brief introspection of like, okay, he does have the app that I used as his bag. However, when I said my name, he didn't respond with, yes, this is for you, name. He instead just handed me the food. Also, he didn't need the confirmation number, which doesn't make any sense at all. So I looked at the side of the bag because I realized there was something wrong there. And then my intuition pinged, so that my intuition was helping as well. And I noticed that it was the wrong store. I couldn't read what it said because it was Italian, and I can't read Italian. But I noticed that clearly this was not my order. So I gave it back to him, and I said, oh, sorry, I think this is not my order. I went with this service, and this is my name. And he's like, oh, I don't think this is your order. I work with 2 different companies, and I think this is a different company than the one that you ordered from. I was like, okay, no problem. And then the guy showed up at like 2 or 3 minutes later and got the food. So this is an example of me using the introspection in the moment, instead of just agreeing and leaving and then thinking about it later. It allowed me to identify a problem in the moment, because I was checking, like, okay, like, what is all of the what's everything, like, what's all the information I have? And then, like, is it wrong to assume that this is the guy? It seems like maybe there is a coincidence going on. So anyway, so introspection. You might not think that that's introspection from what I said earlier. But this is kind of something where this is kind of an advanced form of introspection, where it's like a micro in the moment, you like taking the extra little bit to feel like something got tipped off, and you're like, okay, I need to use like this brief window when I'm walking, because it's like I got the food from him, and I looked at him, he looked at me, and then we had that exchange, and then I started walking back to the building. And so I gave myself like 10 steps to do a quick introspection on all the information I had because I felt like something was just off. And then luckily, it turned out that, like, yeah, I was right. It was something off. So, and then, it ended up, I got my food. It's fine. Everything worked out. But what I'm trying to teach you is like the basic introspection, and then you can level it up over time and do it in shorter windows, like I was talking about, or whatever. And it becomes very natural. Again, this is something where you kind of do it subconsciously. All the steps I explained happened, but a lot of it was subconscious. I felt the process happening, so that's why I slowed down when I was walking, and I really kind of let myself kind of process it, and then I turned the bag, and the whole thing, right? So, so yeah. And it's a very small example. It's not like, obviously it's not a big deal. Even if I took the wrong food, it wouldn't be a big deal. Because I would just bring it back down, and I'd be like, oh, sorry, like, my Uber driver, I say Uber driver, it wasn't Uber, but it's effectively my Uber driver, didn't show up yet or whatever. So, okay. So basic introspection. How does it work? How do you do it? And like, what is this construct that I've built with this? And you don't have to make it a construct. You can just work it through. It's just a habit or whatever. So it doesn't require you to do construct stuff in order for you to use the tool. It's helpful, but you can do it without it. So, at its core, what you're doing is you have a scenario happen, and then you need to basically, as the scenario is playing out, you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping track of your responses to things. And then after the scenario concludes, you look back on what your responses were in the situation. That's like the very basic version of this. And the two key components are making sure you're keeping in mind everything that you're doing in that moment. And it's centered around you. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. They can be really rude, they can be really nice, doesn't matter. What matters is, how did you respond to anything that happened? After the event happens, you take 5-10 minutes and you review everything that you did. And you look at it not from your perspective, but you look at it as if what was happening was a random person. Now, this is not perfect, because you will still have biases, because you know it's you, so you're going to give yourself a lot of slack. However, when you try to like detach yourself from the event, it helps with I just realized something. I really should have. There's another tool I should have like talked about, but I'll do that one after. But yeah, so you detach yourself from the situation, and then pretend it's someone else, and you're like, okay, so this person walks up and has his food. He knew that the driver was like 10 minutes away when he came downstairs. He walked outside and he saw the delivery driver like show up as he was going down the elevator. He was like, oh, wow, the delivery driver's really fast. That's awesome. I better go down there so I don't keep them waiting. That right there was an assumption after the person just looked at their phone and saw that the driver was 10 minutes out. So in the future, if I have a scenario like that happen, what I can do instead is check my phone to make sure that the driver didn't show up. I didn't. My phone was just in my pocket, and I didn't worry about it. I saw the driver, I saw the thing, and I assumed that was my guy. So right there, that's the first piece of introspection where I just analyzed the situation and saw a different outcome that I could have played out. Where instead I could have been more aggressive when I saw the guy say, hey, are you, like, is this the order? And then you show them on the phone, or you say, hey, I'm Thomas. I just want to make sure it says that you're still, like, coming. Is this you? You know, I could have done a lot of things with that information if I had checked and saw that the driver's still on its way. So, yeah, technically this is a little bit of like hindsight, but what you're using this like hindsight for is understanding what you could have done differently as opposed to anyone else. So it's focused on decisions that you can make going forward. And you may not run into the same scenario again, but it's important to be like, okay, I can always check my order. If I have any questions or there's any concern on whether this is the right order, I can make sure and double and triple check to see if this is the right driver. So you can see how the introspection, I'm like working through the problem step by step. And then there's also, even before that, if I had decided to leave 5 minutes later because I left when there was 10 minutes left, well, I didn't have to stand down there for 10 minutes. I could have left when there's only 5 minutes left. Or I could leave when I know the guy's there. Now that poses this whole other host of stuff, but like, you see where I'm coming with this. And so the introspection allows you to see different options. There's no judgment. You're not trying to say, oh, this is what I should have done. It's what are my options that could have existed that I didn't choose. And then in the future, if you have a similar scenario, you can think about, okay, I had all these different options last time. Now let me like pick something that's a bit better than what happened the first time, right? So this is why it's introspection. Introspection is still like a really powerful tool. So yeah. But anyway, so you sit down and you do this introspection. It takes like 5-10 minutes, and you just identify other options you could have done. You don't judge it. You don't say you should have or you wish or whatever. It's just a clinical observation. Now that you've made the observations, you can take that introspection and examine on a deeper level, is there anything internally with my constructs or whatever other mechanisms you have inside, is there anything that I could change about my internal structure that would have made that interaction smoother or make it so I don't even have to have that be an issue? And the answer most of the time is probably no. Like, you did mostly the right thing, and it really just was a little awkward, but it was fine. There's no issues. And going forward, you kind of know, like, okay, like, I'm just going to make extra sure that it's for me. That's it. You probably don't need to do anything else. But there are some things that you'll do that may be incredibly, like, important for you to, like, realize, okay, maybe there's a flaw internally in my, like, structure I've built that if I tweak it just a little bit, it could change everything. And so that's what the power of introspection is. It's the lens with which you get to look at the creation that is you, and you get to decide if there's anything that you need to tweak or completely change. Like, maybe you realize, wow, every time I meet my friends, I call them fucking dickheads, and they actually don't like me calling them that, but I always call them dickheads. And it's like, I think it's funny, but they don't. And so maybe I just shouldn't call them dickheads because it's actually kind of fucked up, you know? So that's like, this is how you work on and adjust, like, behaviors you have on a micro level. Same thing where you can extend that introspection into, obviously you're paying attention to yourself and, like, how you were responding to things, but you can also use that insight into looking into, okay, well, in the case of, like, friends, I call them dickheads, and then I see that they cringe, or their faces get tense, or maybe they, like, gravitate away from me, or there's body language, or whatever it is, right? So it's like, maybe I don't even realize that they don't like when I say that. So me identifying, oh, that's something they don't like, maybe that's the first thing I have to do. But I can't do that if I'm not introspecting, because I don't even think it's a problem, because I'm just letting the thing happen. So now, again, just like with constructs, introspecting, there's kind of a balance. You don't want to necessarily introspect every single interaction you have with everything. But introspecting on a pretty consistent basis, just, like, kind of cataloging, like, okay, was there anything, like, egregious that I did in the store? No? Okay, cool. Like, we're good. So it doesn't have to be super, like, advanced, like, okay, I have to now calculate every trajectory on everything that happened throughout my life every second. You don't have to do that. So yeah, introspection. I think, again, I think it's helpful. And it really, I will say, this type of introspection, you can kind of adapt it to whatever you need to do. So for some people, taking 5 or 10 minutes may just be too long. They may only need, like, a minute or 10 seconds, depending on what it is. So you can kind of make the introspection shorter or longer, depending on what it is. I will also say, taking this introspection, like, skill that you built up and you learn, and then applying it to you learning about yourself. It's like you train yourself on introspecting on small things so that then later on, when you have big things that you want to like look at from your past, it becomes way easier to do that because you've trained the skill. And so you can immediately go into that phase of like, okay, I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Random person doing this thing, da 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 da, whatever, right? Whatever your specific version of introspection looks like. And I also think it's important to remember that you never want to judge yourself when you're introspecting, because judgment is something that it's really easy to fall into the habit of you do introspection, but interlaced with the introspection, you judge as you're doing this, and it becomes almost like a self-harming mechanism where you're like, I can't believe that I went down there and assumed that this guy was my Uber driver. How could I have done that? Like, start like hurting yourself. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. You did the best you could in that moment, and now you are learning about other alternatives you could have done for the future. So there's no judgment there. The moment you put judgment in there, again, it can start to be more like this like or that's not flagellation. It's like you're basically hurting yourself. You get what I'm saying. So yeah, I think that's kind of why, like, I'll just say judgment really, it isn't something you really should have in your like daily life in general. But that's just, that's more of a philosophy thing. So I'm not going to like try and preach anything specific. But I will say that, if you keep yourself judgment free, you're not going to wear down your self-esteem and your ability to kind of be proud of yourself. So yeah, it's a whole other thing. But I'm gonna let you guys go. This is introspection. At least, again, there are different forms of introspection, but this is the way that I kind of use it in order to work on myself. So helpful tool. Hopefully it helps. I'll catch you guys in the next one. All right. Bye.